Hello, I'm Dean Irvin, and welcome to Asia's Developing Future, the podcast of the Asian Development Bank Institute. Industrial policy can determine how countries shape their economies, but the sectors governments support and the skills they prioritize can either reinforce or help close existing inequalities. So what would it mean to design industrial policy that actively advances gender equality? To explore this, I'm joined by Valeria Esquivel, coordinator of the Gender in Employment Group of the International Labour Organization, and Jennifer Castañeda-Navarrete, principal policy analyst at the University of Cambridge's Institute for Manufacturing. Welcome both of you to the podcast.
Thank you, Dean, for having us.
Valeria, let's start with you. If industrial policy is back on the agenda, and historically it's been successful in advancing economies in Asia, how does or should gender fit into this conversation?
Thanks, Dean, for your question. I have to say that gender equality considerations have mostly been absent from industrial policy debates. And this is because gender equality is usually conceived at the micro level. It's about women themselves, whether they have or lack the right skills, the right education, whether the access to capital, and the assumption being that correcting these lacks will automatically solve the gender inequalities we see in the labor market. But we know that that is not the case, and that left on its own, women typically are left behind in development processes or in structural transformation processes, and there are few decent opportunities, employment opportunities available for them. And they face enormous barriers to enter and remain in good jobs. So there is a need to bring gender equality considerations at the forefront of economic policy conversations at the macroeconomic level and also at the sectoral or industrial level.
Jennifer, from your perspective, what are the missed opportunities, maybe for businesses or even national economies and society more broadly, if gender isn't a consideration in policy planning?
As a society, if we don't address gender gaps, we are just reinforcing this. As Valeria mentioned, women are overrepresented in lower paid, in more precarious jobs, but we are also underrepresented in business ownership, in technology upgrading, and also in policy making. So now, if we think in terms of business, obviously, the most obvious opportunity is an unlock talent pool. If we are not employing women, if we are not diversifying our workforce, we're missing an opportunity in terms of talent. But at the same time, more inclusive workplaces lead to lower employee turnover. And then if these workplaces are more inclusive, we will expect that they will attract more diverse teams, but also retain more diverse talent. And this will lead to higher creativity, broader innovation. And at the end, there is increasing evidence that this will lead to higher productivity and business being more competitive. Now, if we aggregate these opportunities at the national level, then what we observe is that diversity and inclusion can contribute not only to economic growth, but also to having more equitable economic outcomes. And for example, there are estimates for the East Asia and Pacific region that this could contribute to economic gains for up to 13% of the gross domestic production. So it can be like a really big economic opportunity. And at the end, this is also about human rights and giving everyone the same opportunities.
Valeria, in a recent event with ADBI and UNIDO, you highlighted the different pathways that are now being taken by developing economies compared to those that were taken by high-income economies in the past. How has that created, or how does it create, new challenges for gender inclusivity?
Of course, the world keeps on changing, and there are new compounded challenges for economists, the advances of digital and automation technologies, AI, and lower generation of employment, the reshoring of manufacturing, and then, of course, the challenges as societies we are facing, the green and demographic transitions. So all these new challenges certainly make things more difficult. More difficult, I mean, for achieving equality, including gender equality. But at the same time, we have lessons learned from our past experience, and we can tap on them. But the vision, of course, remains the same, that we work towards inclusive job reach and sustainable growth. So it is still the case that we need to think where the opportunities, the new opportunities in the green sectors, for example, will be, and make sure that women benefit from those new opportunities. And at the same time, help them navigate the transitions for women not to be the first to be fired when there are contractions in employment, for example.
Jennifer, raising women's participation in manufacturing in the UK is an area that you focused on. As a model that's demonstrated success, are there elements from it that can be applied elsewhere?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I'm really passionate about the Women in Manufacturing UK initiative that I'm part of. I mean, this is still an ongoing journey. We are still learning, but I can recognize that there are some key elements of our governance that perhaps are useful and could be applied in other contexts. The first one is that it is a network model. So we have passionate individuals across industry, policy, and academia. We are also very lucky to have leading organizations who are very well positioned with these communities. Second, I think it's very important that whenever you develop an initiative, you try to identify where you can make the biggest difference. And then we try to develop and to establish a clear mission and having also a measurable target. So our mission is to empower women through inclusive workplace cultures. And our ambition, our target is to increase the participation of women to 35% by 2035. Currently, the participation of women in UK manufacturing is at 28%. It has increased from previous years, but still, we are still far from the target. And third, it's that our work focuses in three pillars that reinforce each other. The first one, and that's how we started our work, is raising awareness. This is mainly about having participation in different industrial forums, organizing conferences. We also work in building an evidence base of what could be considered best practices in this area. Then the last part that is about informing policy. We work very closely with the UK government, in particular with the Department for Business and Trade, and they have become the champions in the policy side.
Thinking more about how that could be applied or working in Asia and the Pacific, have you seen any successful approaches that support gender responsive policies, industrial policies?
In the work that we have done across the region, particularly in Southeast Asia, I have identified three key approaches to improving the gender diversity, but I would say in general, to becoming more inclusive whenever it comes to economic activity. So one is having targeted programs, and I think this is a very well-known approach to improving gender equality. The second is public-private partnerships, and the third one is having a more inclusive governance. So the first one, in terms of targeted programs, for example, in Malaysia, they have a microconnector program, and this program provides technical assistance to entrepreneurs from underrepresented groups. The second approach, the public-private partnerships, we came across this very interesting approach from the Singapore's Infocom Media Development Authority, IMDA. They created the Women in Tech Corporate Pledge. So this is managed by the IMDA, but it's actually providing a space for employers, for companies, to make commitments and to make this public in terms of how they are making sure that women are attracted to their companies, but also how they are creating more inclusive workplaces. And the third one is in terms of inclusive governance. We worked in the past with the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and it was very interesting to see how in their plan of action on science, technology, and innovation for 2026-2035, They explicitly call for reviewing the representation of women in senior science and technology and innovation bodies. And it's very interesting to see because we were involved in the evaluation of the previous plan. And these considerations are a result of embedding a gender perspective in the evaluation of the previous plan.
Some really interesting initiatives there that you've given some examples of. But bringing it back to the level of the actual policy, even when perhaps gender objectives are included in a policy, how can it be ensured that they're implemented correctly? I mean, when do things break down? Valeria, from your perspective.
One thing that we've learned from the analysis of employment policy documents, that could be national employment policies or sectoral policies, is that mentions to gender equality as an objective is not enough. And that we need concrete measures spelled out at all stages of the policy cycle. So, for example, it is incredibly important to start with a gender responsive employment diagnostic, for example, because if the analysis is not there, where women work, what are the working conditions, where they don't have opportunities, what are the barriers, if those things are not in the diagnostics, then thinking about gender equality will be an ex post facto and sometimes even ad hoc thinking that really doesn't work. So the diagnostics then fits into the second stage, which is the policy formulation. And there, again, we need concrete measures, not general, broad statements, but concrete steps to be taken. And then implementation becomes easier, although it's, of course, challenging because things go from paper to actual reality. And then we need also monitoring and evaluation. We need to learn from implementation to derive good practices, but also learn from mistakes and from there start again.
If policymakers could take just one step tomorrow to make industrial policy more gender responsive, what would you recommend?
Certainly social dialogue. I would say that women and women's organizations and workers organizations and the women representatives and employers organizations and businesses, the way Jennifer has described, need to be part of the design, the implementation, the partners in the implementation that need to be there for monitoring and evaluation, so that this is a truly participatory process and there is buy-in, and then also the good results are shared among all stakeholders. That would be my silver bullet, if you want it.
Jennifer, from your perspective?
Difficult question, because obviously, as Valeria mentioned, you really need everything together and you need the social dialogue. But I think I will start with what I think perhaps is the starting point. Measurable targets can be powerful. I think if you embed these targets in an industrial strategy, can signal commitment from the government, and it's also a tool for accountability, and could be also a strategy to bring together different groups and then doing something about it. So I will start with having a measurable target.
Thank you both. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, and we've got some fantastic insights and recommendations, concrete steps for policymakers as well. So I just want to say thank you very much for joining this episode today.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm very happy to share this space with you, Dean and Valeria.